Welcome to DOS 1 Hunt. I'm Joao-Pierre Ruth for Information Week. And in this week's episode, we are going to be taking a look at some takeaways from the most recent AWS Summit in New York City. Not only looking at the summit itself, but also some of the thoughts coming out of the cloud space right now. And for today's conversation, I am joined by Doug Houghton, Director of Channels with Alkira, and Erik Peterson, Founder and CTO for CloudZero. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
So one of the things several things I noticed from this most recent AWS Summit was, there's a lot of conversation about the presence of AI, with the cloud, AI being the technology that we're all really speaking to, even in the media side, having to kind of like discuss what is going on with every aspect or avenue of AI. But really, there was a lot of discussion of the intersection and from at least AWS's terms, the reliance of the cloud to help with a lot of the things that are being done, innovations that are happening with AI. But before we go into talking about that, really obvious, elephant in the room. So I'm going to get from each of you just some of your thoughts about, not only the summit, but also what are some of the things that you look for when you're, coming to these kinds of conferences, trying to, not only engage in what what the major cloud providers are up to, what others, potential peers or even rivals are even discussing. What are some of the things that you're trying to get a sense of, pay close attention to when you come to these kinds of conferences? And Doug, I was hoping you could start off with your thoughts.
I'd be happy to. I have to say that the conference this year was really well attended. That seems to, it was good to see. Post-pandemic, I went to the conference. It was also well attended. AWS seems to attract a lot of enterprise customers, a lot of folks who are, presenting their solutions to those enterprise customers. The reason that I go not only to support and have those conversations with those enterprise customers is to figure out what sort of business problems that they're trying to solve, because, you brought it up, Gen AI it's great. It's really interesting technology. It dominates the VC sort of landscape. It dominates the media market. Everything in technology seems to be very AI centric. But, when you put rubber to road, what are the use cases that you're trying to solve for, right? And so you can build a solution without a problem. It just never really takes off. And so we'll see how it sort of evolves. I thought the conference was really successful. AWS did a really good job of putting it on, and they usually do. They even fed us lunch, which I thought was amazing. But the takeaways from me were, yes, we've got this sort of new technology that's super disruptive, but still looking for a large acceptance across the enterprise space as we try to figure out use cases that technology can solve. For me, the value in going is, again, just to sort of reiterate, is talking to customers and seeing what new problems are evolving in their space. And that's typically the most informative as an OEM like Alkira.
Gotcha. Great, thank you for that. Erik, can you give me some of your sense of, what you might have been like? Was it a matter of, for you, also looking to, speak to potential customers or other peers, or were there things from from breakout sessions or the keynote that you're hoping to, hear a little something about?
Well, like most conferences, I think many of us have attended over the last 18 months. They've all been Gen AI conferences. This year's NY Summit did not disappoint in that regard. The conversations that I'm always looking for are the ones that happen in the hallway directly with the customers, the folks in the world who are building, innovating, creating. The things that I was hoping to hear the most about this at this summit, and for me personally did not disappoint, was the conversation shifting from not just wild abandon around embracing some of these new Gen AI kind of technologies, but thinking a little bit more around efficiency and stability and how one can actually, as a business, start to embrace these things to create profitable products, innovations that are actually going to scale and are actually going to support these business initiatives. And in that regard, I was very happy to kind of hear some of the conversations I had with a lot of leaders in the space, from CEO at Stability talking about unit economics, to the conversation I had with the folks leading infrastructure at Lyft or WeWork talking about how they're thinking about building more efficient systems. I was really pleased to see that that world of not just AI cloud investment, but general cloud investment moving more towards this mindset around how every engineering decision we're making today is a buying decision, and how we need to really be embracing these kinds of concepts of efficiency, even as we're starting to invest in some of these new Gen AI technologies. Otherwise, at the end of the day, if we're not going to be building profitable products out of all of this, we might end up kind of stalling out on this Gen AI path. But I was not disappointed at all. In fact, this conference was phenomenal for me, from the conversations I had in the hallway and all the things that I heard up on the stage.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you for that. So, like, each of you to kind of think about, like, what were, I mean, to kind of, piggybacking on things that you've already just said, what were some of the, I would say, 3 top concerns or interests that you're really, like, can maybe even bring, going into the conference, or even maybe had discussions on, Doug, I think you kind of talked about, like, wanting to hear people's pain points and like understanding that, what, if you could just like pick 3, like kind of distill 3 things, sure, it can be AI, right. But what, 3 things that if you were to kind of pick out and say, like, hey, these are some of the kind of, like, things going on in the trenches of the cloud that really you either wanted to hear more about or definitely discussed.
It's a good question, but I should disclose that I see the world with sort of a connectivity framework, right? Mm-hmm. Ours is the idea of providing ubiquitous connectivity across all networking domains, or in all, it's node-to-node comms, and how do you secure that, and how do you make sure that you can easily instantiate it, get visibility, provide governance, and stuff like that. So the NASDAQ guy, Brad Peterson, was really good, because he talked about from shortening that support cycle when they were looking to remediate, sort of customer abuse issues, when people are taking advantage of something within the marketplace. NASDAQ has an obligation, a fiduciary obligation to their customers, to go out and sort of hunt down the thing. I think AI, he said something like about a third. It shortened their support cycle about a third. So I thought that was interesting. Other trends that were compelling to me were in and around cloud. We see this a lot. Customers come to us and say, can you help me remediate egress expense, right? And that seems to be big. And then, pairing that up with FinOps is another sort of emerging growth market inside of and adjacent to cloud, right? How do you deal with those large egress expenses? Because it's easy to get into cloud. It's like a roach motel. It's very difficult to get out, right? So thinking through that from an architectural perspective, does it make more sense to lay the traffic off onto some layer 2 circuit? We provide a routed overlay that sits across all of public cloud. Is it better to keep your DER in the cloud? That was one of the things that I had a lot of discussions around. I met several customers who still plumb traffic back into their data centers, but yet use cloud for DR, and I think that's a really interesting use case as well. And then sort of finally, what I thought in terms of segmentation and or security across nodes, how do you easily instantiate that stuff and while you're contending with privacy regs, GDPR and other things, to include, business partner connectivity and all of that, where, we have a big financial as a customer, and they like to extend their network to their customers so that their customers can use a portion of the application to do research and et cetera. So how do you do that easily, and how do you do it without, sort of burdening your networking and cloud architectural staff to, jump through too many hoops to make that happen? Those were sort of the things that I saw. So FinOps, and then using AI to remediate and improve business practices, and then the idea of securing and sharing your network with your business partners. Because as we all know in this call, this is becoming a really integrated sort of world with respect to assets that you share from cloud and or from data center. What's the easiest way to do that? I found those compelling, and I heard a lot as I talked to a lot of customers. The cool thing about the conference was you had 400 3-minute conversations with people to discuss their problems and how technology can sort of address those things. And I think I'll cede the floor to my friend Erik here to answer the same question.
Well, it was certainly a lot of on-demand, very elastic, constantly scaling to just lean into the cloud metaphor here, right. Conversations in the hallway. Right. There was kind of a nonstop kind of drumbeat around just the sheer volume of new features and services. And I think if you even think about, just some of the things that were announced during Matt Wood's keynote, which I thought was really well done, he leaned in on a couple of points that I think are really important, for all of us to be thinking about, and it tied really deeply into some of the conversations I was having with some of the customers. This idea that the data always has this, he may not have said these words, but the data always has this gravity associated with it. And today, the vast majority of kind of cloud workloads operate in AWS. That has a lot of pull towards that. There's a lot of data being generated by that. And it is really an opportunity for Amazon to get right. In some ways, they're not necessarily the first to this party, but they are certainly moving very, very fast in this regard. And I think some of the innovations they've done on Bedrock have been pretty impressive to me, but it's ultimately driven by the data. And it's ultimately driven by the availability of compute and the other kind of systems that we can put to bear to kind of process this information or data and turn it into information. And so that gets into some of the concerns on the FinOps side specifically, where customers were talking about how they might be struggling to get some of that compute capacity or service capacity, and finding the data existing on one side of the globe and needing to move it to the other side of the globe. And those data transfer costs really start to take effect when you think about that. Or simply struggling to get the compute capacity in one cloud provider versus another cloud provider and having to move that over the internet. Is also a challenge. So all of those things were kind of aspects of this kind of broader matrix of challenges when they think about compute, data, the gravity that it's trying to pull everything towards, kind of a center, all of these new services, trying to understand how do I keep up with all of that. And then just this general sense of we are no longer in the world, or we can't allow ourselves to drift back into the world of growth at all costs. There was a conversation, particularly in the VC community during the past couple of years, around maybe we should be more focused on efficient growth. And the concept that I wanted to see people starting to adopt is one that is more, I think, aligned with cloud native design, which is resilient growth. Let's create systems that scale up and scale down with demand. Let's embrace elasticity. Let's embrace some of these more profitable, more efficient data patterns, and try not to go back to the days of just raw compute sitting idle waiting for a workload. And so those are some of the things that Matt Wood spoke to. Talked about capacity and purchasing capacity, and picking the right model for the right job, and the data living where it is, and being able to align those things. Started to feed those elements together. And I think a lot of these requirements, because we have, thanks to the cloud, this kind of infinite scale and capacity at our fingertips in some ways, but the fundamental truth is we don't have infinite wallet, right? And we need to start to embrace some of these FinOps concepts and think about how we align the money we're spending with the business outcomes that we're shooting for.